حي على الفلاح.
Until the 20th century, the term Syria generally denoted those lands of the Levant or Eastern littoral of the Mediterranean that correspond to modern Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, Cyprus, and parts of Turkey, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. When the Roman Empire fell, Syria became part of the Eastern or Byzantine Empire. In 637 AD, Muslim armies defeated the Byzantine Empire and took control of Syria. Islam spread quickly throughout the region, and its different factions rose to power. Abdullah Ibn Umar R reports that the Prophet ﷺ made the following supplication: O Allah, bless our Sham. O Allah, bless our Yemen. The people of Najd said, and also our Najd. The Prophet ﷺ supplicated again, O Allah, bless our Sham. O Allah, bless our Yemen. The people said again, and also our Najd. The Prophet ﷺ, it is the place of earthquakes and tribulations. The horn of the devil will appear from there. Three geographical factors have played major parts in determining the history of Syria: its location on the trade and military routes, its varied topography, and the encroaching desert. Syria has always been an object of conquest, and it has been held by foreign powers during much of its history, including the Egyptians, Hittites, Sumerians, Mitanni, Assyrians, Babylonians, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Armenians, Amorites, Persians, Greeks, and Romans. The language of the region was Aramaic, the same language that Jesus ﷺ would speak to his early followers. Centuries later, Alexander the Great took Syria around 334 BCE and made it part of the Seleucid, Greek-influenced empire. The Jewish Hasmoneans tried to exert control, but the Romans took Antioch in 64 BCE and made Syria a Roman province. The Byzantine Christians held sway as Syria became a key province. Over this period, Syria held prominence in providing two of the Roman emperors of the time. Some notable examples of ancient Syrian cities include the following: Aleppo. People began living here from the 6th century BCE, and during the Ottoman Empire, it was the third largest Muslim city after Istanbul and Cairo. Aleppo was at the start of the Silk Route to China. Aleppo is still the largest city in Syria. Antioch, ancient city near modern Antakya on the Syria-Turkish border, founded in the 4th century BCE. At its height, it had a population of 500,000 people and was known as the cradle of Christianity. It is also the place where the first Jewish converts were called Christians. Damascus, the second largest city in Syria, and was known as al-sham. It has been a settlement for around 4,000 years. There were many Jews living there, and many synagogues built after the diaspora. Damascus served as the capital of the Islamic Empire under the Umayyads from 661 to 750 CE, while ruling an area that stretched from Spain to India. Idlib, city founded around 3000 BCE, which flourished through trade with Egypt, Sumer, and Akkad until around 240 BCE. Homs, this city emerged under Greek rule in the 1st century BCE under the name Emesa. It was originally a center for the worship of the sun god El-Gabal, but later took on significance for Christians and Muslims. Palmyra, known as the Bride of the Desert. This oasis city was a caravan trading stop for desert traders. Palmyra featured a huge temple to Baal. It is thought to have been linked to King Solomon of Judea. It was captured by Khalid ibn al-Walid in 634 CE. The city thrived until the Ottoman period. Due to the various empires that had an influence in Syria, many early temples were dedicated to deities from all sides, such as Zeus and Artemis. Adonis, also known as Baal, and Tammuz was also exported to Arabia as the deity Hubal. Al-Lat was another deity worshipped in Arabia and Syria, in which had temples showing Al-Lat as a lion in Palmyra. The Jews had been in Syria for a long time, and the Jewish historian Josephus recorded that the most significant Jewish diaspora communities were in Syria, specifically mentioning Antioch. In the Christian era, Syria played a very prominent role. Many of the early Christian philosophers and thinkers were from Syria, as Antioch became one of the hubs of Christian leadership alongside Jerusalem, Alexandria, Constantinople, and Rome. St. Paul, who shaped modern Christianity, was based at Antioch and undertook many of his missionary journeys from there. Paul, according to the Bible, became converted on the way to Damascus, where he was planning to visit the synagogues and capture any Jews who had accepted Christianity. The Bible describes the Christians in Syria. Then Barnabas went to Tarsus to look for Saul, Paul, and when he found him, he brought him to Antioch. So it was that for an entire year they met with the church and taught a great many people. And it was in Antioch that the disciples were first called Christians. Peter and Barnabas were actively preaching to the Jews in Syria. The church of Antioch gained strength over the next few centuries and was a center of Christian learning and debate on topics such as the nature of Jesus ﷺ and the Trinity. Syria had been under Roman rule for 7 centuries prior to the Arab Muslim conquest and had been invaded by the Sassanid Persians on a number of occasions during the 3rd, 6th, and 7th centuries. During the last of the Roman-Persian wars, beginning in 603, the Persians under Khosra II had succeeded in occupying Syria, Palestine, and Egypt for over a decade before being forced by the victories of Heraclius to conclude the peace of 628. Thus, on the eve of the Muslim conquests, the Romans or the Byzantines were still in the process of rebuilding their authority in these territories, which in some areas had been lost to them for almost 20 years. Politically, the Syrian region consisted of 2 provinces. Syria proper stretched from Antioch and Aleppo in the north to the top of the Dead Sea. To the west and south of the Dead Sea lay the province of Palestine. The 7th century was a time of rapid military change in the Byzantine Empire. The empire was certainly not in a state of collapse when it faced the new challenge from Arabia after being exhausted by recent Roman-Persian wars, but utterly failed to tackle the challenge effectively. Islam emerged in Arabia at the start of the 7th century CE. Muhammad ﷺ went on many trade caravans with his uncle Abu Talib to Syria, visiting towns such as Basra, Damascus, Homs, and Antioch on the way. When Muhammad ﷺ was 40, the revelation appeared to him, marking the beginning of prophethood in Islam. In late 620s, Prophet Muhammad had already managed to conquer and unify much of Arabia under Muslim rule, and it was under his leadership that the first Muslim-Byzantine skirmishes took place in response to Byzantine incursions. Just a few months after Heraclius and the Persian general Shahrbaraz agreed on terms for the withdrawal of Persian troops from occupied Byzantine eastern provinces in 629, Arab and Byzantine troops confronted each other at the Battle of Mu'tah. During the battle, all 3 Muslim leaders fell one after the other as they took command of the force. Finally, Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anh took over. Khalid, seeing that the situation was hopeless, prepared to withdraw. He continued to engage the Byzantines in skirmishes, but avoided pitched battle. In the night, he completely changed his troop positions and brought forth a rear guard that he had equipped with new banners. All this was intended to give the impression that reinforcements had arrived from Medina. He also ordered his cavalry to retreat behind a hill during the night, hiding their movements, and then to return during daytime when the battle resumed, raising as much dust as they could. This also was intended to create the impression that further reinforcements were arriving. The Byzantines believed in the fictitious reinforcements and hesitated, thus allowing Muslim force to safely retreat to Medina. The Prophet ﷺ died in 632 and was succeeded by Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, the first caliph with undisputed control of the entire Arab peninsula. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh began to expand, beginning with Iraq, sending his most brilliant general, Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anh. Iraq was conquered in a series of successful campaigns against the Sassanid Persians. Abu Bakr's confidence grew, and once Khalid established his stronghold in Iraq, Abu Bakr issued a call to arms for the invasion of Syria. The Byzantines were decisively defeated at Ajnadain. Damascus soon fell, followed by the Battle of Fa'al, in which the last significant garrison of Palestine was defeated and routed. After the death of Abu Bakr in 634, his successor, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anh, was determined to continue the expansion deeper into Syria. Though previous campaigns led by Khalid had been successful, he was replaced by Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiallahu anh. Having secured southern Palestine, Muslim forces now advanced up the trade route, and Tiberias and Baalbek fell without much struggle and conquered Emesa early in 636. The Muslims then continued their conquest across the Levant. Having seized Emesa, the Muslims were just a march away from Aleppo, a Byzantine stronghold, and Antioch, where Heraclius resided. Seriously alarmed by the series of setbacks, Heraclius prepared for a counterattack to reacquire the lost regions. Byzantine preparations began in late 635, and by May 636, Heraclius had a large force concentrated at Antioch in northern Syria. Heraclius himself supervised the operation from Antioch. The Rashidun army was then split into 4 groups: one under Amr in Palestine, one under Shurabil in Jordan, one under Yazid in the Damascus, Caesarea region, and the last one under Abu Ubaidah along with Khalid at Emesa. The Battle of Yarmuk in August 636 between the Rashidun Caliphate and the Byzantine Empire over 6 days near the Yarmuk River, along what is today the border between Syria and Jordan, southeast of the Sea of Galilee, marked the first great battle between the Byzantines and the Muslims. Historical accounts generally place the size of the Muslim forces between 36,000 and 40,000, while estimates for the Byzantine forces range between 60,000 and 70,000. Modern assessments vary, with some suggesting the Byzantine army size to be between 80,000 and 150,000. While the Muslims were getting ready to fight against the Romans, one of them said, "How numerous the Romans are, and how few the Muslims are." Khalid got angry and said, "The reverse is true. It is victory that makes the troops numerous, and defeat that makes them few." The time drew close, and the two armies met. The situation was tense, and each soldier was on guard. The Romans began by attempting to bribe the Muslim army, yet this was immediately rejected by Khalid ibn al-Walid, may Allah be pleased with him, who offered the Romans to accept Islam and pay the jizya, or settle on the sword. The arrogance of the Romans prevented them from accepting the light of guidance, and they opted for the sword. The Muslims fought with such zeal and passion that the Romans began to retreat. The Romans were up against not humans, but the army of Allah, and no power invested in them could challenge such an army. Day turned to night, yet the fighting continued. The Romans were failing, exhausted and tired, yet the spirit of Islam had not received even a dent. Fatigue and frustration settled into the midst of the Roman army, which continued to retreat until their backs were pushing against the mountain. Many soldiers fell into the river, while others were slain. The Romans were destroyed. The Battle of Yarmuk is regarded as one of the most decisive battles in military history, and it marked the first great wave of Islamic conquests after the death of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, heralding the rapid advance of Islam into the then Christian Levant. As for the Muslims, they first took Jordan from the Romans and then laid siege to Damascus, which was heavily fortified. The inhabitants resisted the Muslims from behind their walls, and at the same time urged the emperor to send them reinforcements. Heraclius made one attempt to help them, but finding it futile, stopped all further attempts. History books still quote the emperor's words of farewell: "Goodbye, Syria. I do not think we shall meet again." It was not long before Damascus opened two of its gates to the Muslims, one forced by Khalid and the other opened peacefully by Abu Ubaidah. With the capital in the hands of the Muslims and with the Romans driven out forever, Syria became a Muslim country. Many schools and libraries were opened, which attracted scholars from across the Muslim world, such as the Library of Banu Jarada in Aleppo. The House of Hadith in Damascus attracted scholars such as Ibn Kathir, An-Nawawi, Taqiyuddin Subki, and Ibn Salah. Hospitals were built, including the famous Nuri Hospital, built by Sultan Malik Nuruddin for the poor and helpless. In the 12th century, a school of illumination, al-Ishraq, was established by Yahya Suhrawardi in Aleppo. During this period, Islam expanded into Cyprus, Turkestan, Spain, and modern Pakistan. All the while, Damascus was gaining prominence worldwide at the center of the growing Islamic Empire, and scholars and artisans from across the empire were meeting in Syria to share ideas. The 12th century saw the start of centuries of turmoil, starting with crusades from Europe. The French created the Principality of Antioch, and for centuries, Crusader forces would pass through Syria on their way to Jerusalem. Aleppo and Damascus fell to the Mongol hordes in 1260, but as they were stretched, the Mongols were soon pushed back by the Mamluks of Egypt, which was an ongoing struggle in the years that followed between the Mamluks and the Mongols. In 1400, the Mongols led by Timur Lenk retook Aleppo and Damascus and massacred most of the inhabitants. Only those of value to them were taken to Samarkand in Central Asia. The pressure was only released at the end of the 15th century when the emergence of the sea route to China via Africa lessened the need for a land trade route. The Turkish Ottoman Muslim Empire wrestled control of Syria in 1516, and suddenly Damascus came to prominence again as a key center for pilgrims heading to Mecca from elsewhere in the Ottoman Empire. This remained the case until 1916, when the French and British took control and divided the region according to political needs. Modern Syria is a melting pot of many religious sects. 70% are Sunni Muslims, 12% are Shia Muslims, including the Alawite sect of the Assad leading family. 15% of Syrians are Christians, and of the remaining 13, 3 are Druze, and there is a Jewish minority. Abu Umama radiallahu anh reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Sham is the chosen region of Allah, and He will gather His chosen servants in it. So why would the angels of mercy not keep their wings spread over this land?" Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anh reports that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Glad tidings for Sham. Indeed, the angels of the Most Merciful spread their wings over it." The angels stationed over Sham are for its protection too. We learn that due to the blessings of the pious people of Allah Almighty, there is peace and protection in the country. It should be noted that this does not mean Syria will face no difficulties. However, there will be less tribulations, sin, and disbelief.